The ballroom of the Grand Hyatt was a cathedral of opulence. Crystal chandeliers cascaded from the vaulted ceiling like frozen waterfalls of light. Thousands of tiny LED bulbs were woven through cascading white orchids that draped every pillar, transforming the space into a luminous greenhouse. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, champagne, and the electric hum of ambition. This was the International Design Excellence Awards, the most prestigious ceremony in the architectural world. And I, Valentina Rossi, the youngest partner at Rossi and Associates, one of the most innovative architectural firms in the country, was the keynote speaker. I had just been awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award for Sustainable Urban Design. IT was the culmination of 15 years of blood, sweat, and tears. My husband, Julian Blackwood, was supposed to be in the front row. He was the CEO of Blackwood Construction, the company that had built half the skyscrapers in the city. He was also the man who had promised to love and cherish me for the rest of my life. That I had believed him. That I had believed all of it. I was wearing a gown that was a masterpiece of engineering in its own right, a column of liquid silver silk that clung to my curves and pooled at my feet like molten mercury. It had been designed by a friend, a genius who understood that architecture and fashion were the same art form. I felt like a goddess. I felt invincible. The crowd applauded as I walked to the podium. I caught Julian's eye in the front row. He was smiling, but it was a tight, brittle smile, the kind he wore when he was about to deliver bad news. Beside him sat a woman I didn't recognize. She was stunning in a way that seemed almost otherworldly. Hair like spun gold, eyes the color of a winter sky. She was wearing a gown that must have cost more than my first car, and she was holding Julian's hand. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I pushed it down. I was a professional. I had a speech to deliver. I adjusted the microphone and began. "Thank you all for this incredible honor," I said, my voice ringing through the ballroom. Architecture is not just about buildings. It's about the stories we tell with steel and glass. It's about creating spaces that shape lives, that heal communities, that... Julian stood up. The screech of his chair against the marble floor cut through my speech like a knife. The crowd murmured. The cameras turned to him. He walked toward the stage, his expensive Oxfords clicking with deliberate confidence. He climbed the steps and took the microphone from me. "I'm sorry to interrupt, darling," he said, his voice dripping with false affection. "But there's something the world needs to know. Something I've been hiding for far too long." I stared at him. My mind was a blank wall. I had no idea what he was about to do, but every instinct screamed that this was a trap. Julian turned to the audience. "Valentina Rossi is a brilliant architect," he said. "There's no denying that, but she didn't build her reputation on her own work. She stole it. Every single one of her designs was taken from the woman I truly love, the woman I've always loved, the woman who should have been at my side all along." He gestured to the blonde in the front row. She stood, her movements graceful and rehearsed. She walked to the stage, her heels clicking like a countdown. Julian took her hand. He looked at me with a cold, dismissive smile. "This is Serafina Vance," he said. "My first love, and my true love. We met in college, before I ever met Valentina. Serafina is the genius behind the Rossi aesthetic. The flowing lines, the integration with nature, the sustainable materials. Everything Valentina has been credited with was actually Serafina's vision. Valentina was just the copier, the stand-in, the substitute who got lucky." The audience gasped. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands were shaking. I looked at Serafina. She was smirking, her eyes glittering with triumph. "He used you, Valentina," she said, her voice soft but lethal. "He married you because I was unavailable. I was in Europe, recovering from an illness. When I came back, he realized what a mistake he'd made. You were never more than a placeholder, the convenient body to warm his bed while he waited for me." I looked at Julian, the man I'd given 15 years of my life to, the man I'd supported when his company was on the brink of bankruptcy. The man I designed his flagship skyscraper for free, because he'd said he couldn't afford the fees. The man who had held my hand when my mother died. The man who had promised me forever. "You're lying," I said, my voice barely a whisper. But even as I said it, I knew it was true. I remembered the sketches I'd found in his study years ago. Drawings in a feminine hand, dated before we'd met. I dismissed them as his own early work. I'd been so blind. "I have the receipts, Valentina." Julian said. He pulled a sheaf of papers from his jacket and held them up to the cameras. Original sketches, patent filings, all in Serafina's name. You've been passing off her work as your own for 15 years. The awards, the accolades, the contracts, they were all built on a lie, and tonight, the lie ends. The room erupted. People were shouting. Camera flashes were blinding. I could see the board members of the Architectural Association exchanging panicked glances. My agent was staring at me with a look of utter betrayal, and my reputation, my life's work, was crumbling in front of the entire world. But Julian wasn't finished. He pulled out another document. This one was stamped with the seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And that's not all, he said, his voice rising with theatrical outrage. Valentina hasn't just been stealing designs. She's been selling them to foreign governments. She's been passing classified architectural plans for government buildings to a shell company in the Middle East. She's a traitor, a spy, and I have the proof. My knees buckled. I grabbed the edge of the podium to steady myself. That's insane, I said. I've never... Save it for the judge, Julian interrupted. The FBI is already here. They've been waiting for this moment. They have warrants. They have evidence. They have everything they need to put you away for the rest of your life. Security guards appeared on either side of me. They were wearing FBI jackets. One of them took my arm. Valentina Rossi, you are under arrest for espionage, theft of intellectual property, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I just looked at Julian, the man I had loved, the man I had trusted, the man who had just destroyed everything I'd built. He was smiling. He was holding Serafina's hand. He was basking in the chaos. This is a setup, I said, my voice shaking. You're framing me. You're doing this to steal my designs, my patents, my reputation. You're doing this to cover up your own crimes. Julian laughed. Good luck proving that. Darling, I've been planning this for years. Every piece of evidence points to you. Every document, every email, every transaction. You're going to prison, Valentina, and I'm going to take everything you've ever owned. It's poetic, really. You built your empire on lies. Now you get to watch it crumble. The FBI agents led me out of the ballroom. The cameras followed me. The guests were shouting, pointing, pulling out their phones. I could hear Julian's voice in the background, playing the victim, playing the wronged husband. I could hear Serafina's laughter, light and triumphant. I was put in the back of an unmarked car. The agents drove me to a federal detention center. I was stripped of my belongings. I was put in a holding cell. I was interrogated for hours. They asked me about shell companies, about encrypted emails, about bank accounts in the Cayman Islands that I denied everything that I told them I was being framed. I told them to check Julian's background, his business dealings, his secret mistress. They didn't believe me. The evidence was too perfect. The weeks that followed were a nightmare. I was denied bail. I was held in solitary confinement. The media crucified me. Architectural fraud. The spy who designed skyscrapers. Valentina, the traitor. My awards were rescinded. MY contracts were canceled. MY reputation was shredded. Julian and Serafina became the darlings of the industry. They were everywhere, on magazine covers, on talk shows. In the boardrooms where I used to command respect. I was eventually released on bail. Pending trial, MY firm had to sell off its assets to pay for my legal fees. I was forced to sell my penthouse, my cars, my jewelry. I was living in a tiny apartment in a rundown part of town, surviving on ramen noodles and the kindness of strangers. But I never stopped fighting. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Rosa, who had a reputation for being the best. She was tough, relentless, and she believed me. She started digging into Julian's past, his business dealings, his connections. She discovered that Serafina Vance was a ghost. She didn't exist before the year Julian and I had gotten married. She was a fabrication, a persona created to steal my work. Rosa also discovered that Julian had been embezzling funds from his own company. He had been using Blackwood Construction as a front for money laundering. He had been selling government contracts to foreign buyers. He was the spy, not me. He had planted the evidence on me to cover his own tracks. We have him, Rosa said one night, her voice electric with excitement. We have the proof, the real proof, the fake bank accounts, the doctored emails, the shell companies, it's all here. And I've got a contact at the FBI who's willing to listen, but we have to be careful. He's dangerous. He's already killed one person to keep his secrets. He won't hesitate to kill again. I felt a chill run down my spine. Who did he kill? The original Serafina Vance, Rosa said. She was a real person, a struggling artist he met in college. He used her name, her identity, her sketches, and then he had her killed. Made it look like an accident, a car crash, and no one suspected a thing. The memories came flooding back. The night Julian had proposed to me. He had been so charming, so convincing. He had told me I was the love of his life. But I remembered the way he'd flinched when I touched him, the way he'd always been just a little too guarded. I remembered the secret phone calls, the late night meetings, the unexplained absences. I had been so blind, so trusting. I started working on my own evidence. I accessed the archives of my old firm, the ones Julian hadn't been able to delete. I found the original CAD files for all of my designs, dated years before Serafina's supposed original sketches. I found emails from subcontractors who had worked on the projects, confirming that I was the lead designer. I found testimonies from engineers who had collaborated with me, who had seen me work, who knew the truth. I also found something else, an encrypted file that Julian had hidden on his personal server. Rosa's hacker friend cracked it open. Inside were documents detailing Julian's criminal network. The money laundering, the bribery, the espionage at IT was all there. The names, the dates, the transactions, the proof of his guilt. The trial was the most publicized event of the year. The courtroom was packed. The media was everywhere. Julian sat in the defendant's chair, his expensive suit rumpled, his face pale. Serafina was beside him, but she looked different. Her confidence was gone. She was nervous, fidgeting, avoiding my gaze. I walked into the courtroom in a tailored suit. I had sold my last piece of jewelry to afford it. I looked Julian in the eye. He didn't look away. He had that same cold, dismissive smile. He was still confident. He still thought he was going to win. The prosecution presented their case. They had the evidence Julian had planted, the forged emails, the doctored bank statements, the fake witness testimony. IT was a compelling story. It was also a complete fabrication. Then it was my turn. I presented my evidence, the original CAD files, the time-stamped documents, the testimonies from the subcontractors, and then I presented the encrypted file. The one that detailed Julian's criminal network. The one that proved he was the spy, not me. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Julian's face went white. Serafina was crying. Julian's lawyers were scrambling. But it was too late. The evidence was irrefutable. We have additional evidence, I said, my voice steady. Evidence that Julian Blackwood murdered the original Serafina Vance. He had her killed to steal her identity. He was planning to frame me for espionage all along. He did it for the money, for the power, for the thrill. I presented the documents Rosa's hacker had found, the car crash report, the insurance claim, the testimony of a witness who had seen Julian's car leaving the scene. IT was all there. The proof of his guilt. Julian stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. "This is a lie," he shouted. "She's a liar. She's trying to destroy me because I left her for another woman. She's insane. She's..." The judge banged her gavel. "Mr. Blackwood, I am ordering you to sit down and remain silent. If you continue to disrupt these proceedings, I will hold you in contempt." Julian slumped back into his chair. The fight had gone out of him. He knew he was finished. The verdict took 3 hours. I waited in the gallery, surrounded by the people who had believed in me. MY assistant, Priya. MY private investigator, Rosa. The subcontractors who had testified on my behalf. They were my support system, my found family. The jury returned. The foreman stood. On the charge of espionage, we find the defendant, Julian Blackwood, guilty. That on the charge of murder, we find the defendant, Julian Blackwood, guilty. On the charge of embezzlement, we find the defendant, Julian Blackwood, guilty. That on the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, we find the defendant, Julian Blackwood, guilty. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Julian was screaming. Serafina was crying. The bailiffs were trying to restrain them. I sat in my seat, my hands trembling. That I had won, but I felt nothing. And oh joy. No relief, just a quiet, exhausted emptiness. Julian was led away in handcuffs. His face was a mask of rage and defeat. As he passed me, he spat. "You'll pay for this, Valentina. You'll pay." I looked at him. I've already paid. Julian, did I paid with 15 years of my life? Did I paid with my reputation, my career, my home? But I'm still standing. And you have nothing. You'll be in prison for the rest of your life. And when you get out, you'll have nothing left and oh money and oh power and oh Serafina. She's already been arrested for fraud. She'll be joining you soon. He lunged at me. The bailiffs restrained him. He was dragged away, still screaming, still cursing. A year later, I was back on a stage. But this time, it was my stage that I had founded a new firm. Rossi Reborn IT was the most innovative, most respected firm in the country. My designs were featured in every major magazine. MY buildings were landmarks. MY name was on the cover of Time as the architect of the century. Julian was in a maximum security prison. He had been sentenced to life without parole for the murder of Serafina Vance. He would die in prison. His company had been dismantled. His assets had been seized. His name was Mud. Serafina was serving a 20-year sentence for fraud. She would be old when she got out. She would have nothing. No money. No reputation, no future, just the bitter taste of defeat. I had moved on. I had a new apartment, a new life, a new sense of purpose. I didn't need a man to complete me. I didn't need validation from anyone. I was complete on my own. I had my career. I had my friends. I had my future. The world was a vast, beautiful place, and I was ready to conquer it. I stood on the balcony of my new office, looking out over the city. I remembered the night of the awards ceremony, the chandeliers, the orchids, the cameras. I remembered the look on Julian's face when he framed me. I remembered the cold, empty feeling of being in that holding cell. But I wasn't empty anymore. I was full of purpose, full of the future. The years ahead were mine to shape. No Julian, no Serafina, no chains, just the wide open sky.